The air beneath the dome always felt heavy, like the weight of the false sky pressed against Rin's lungs. Even after years working as a technician, the faint hum of the energy field overhead still rattled her nerves. It wasn't the kind of noise you could get used to. It wasn't supposed to be there at all. She stood on the catwalk of the Eastern Maintenance Hub, gazing out at the sprawling slums below. The city had grown like a parasite, feeding on scraps from the Sky Council's towers, which loomed far in the distance. The towers gleamed in artificial sunlight, pristine and unreachable, a mockery of the world below. Rin adjusted her visor and pulled up the maintenance logs on her tablet. Another fluctuation, 3 this week. The council's official line was that these readings were routine recalibrations, but Rin knew better. Systems didn't just glitch this often without a reason. Something was wrong with the dome. A sharp crackle in her earpiece made her flinch. "Rin, you there?" Kaylin's voice broke through, casual as always, but with an edge that set her on alert.
Yeah,
She replied, keeping her tone neutral.
I'm at Hub 42. What's up?
"Got word from Central. They're sending inspectors to review last week's patchwork. Don't screw it up this time." Rin clenched her jaw, gripping the railing until her knuckles turned white. Kaylin had a knack for taking credit when things went right and pointing fingers when they didn't. She forced herself to focus.
The patch held fine. It's the grid that's unstable, not the repairs.
"Whatever you say, just don't draw attention." The line went dead before she could respond. Typical Kaylin. Rin shoved the tablet into her pack and climbed onto the scaffolding. Below her, a web of conduits and energy relays glowed faintly blue, pulsating like veins. She knelt and pried open a junction box, exposing the tangled mess of wires inside. Her hands moved on instinct, steady and precise, but her thoughts churned. The fluctuations weren't random. The readings followed a pattern, one she hadn't dared share with anyone, not even Kaylin. Every spike seemed to come from deeper within the dome's core, closer to the reactors that powered the entire shield. If they failed, Rin didn't let herself finish the thought. She wasn't ready to face what that meant. A sudden surge of light erupted from the conduit, bathing her in a harsh blue glow. Rin flinched, shielding her eyes. Her heart pounded as the hum intensified, growing louder and more erratic. Sparks rained down from the junction box, and the air around her buzzed with static. She yanked her tools away, her pulse racing. The fluctuation wasn't just a blip, it was escalating, fast. She scrambled back, nearly slipping on the catwalk. Her visor flashed warnings across her field of vision. "Core instability detected. Report immediately,"
No.
she muttered under her breath, pulling up the raw data on her tablet. The readings spiked violently, the numbers blinking red. This wasn't normal. This was sabotage. Rin's breath hitched as realization struck. Someone was tampering with the dome. Someone who knew exactly how to destabilize it. And if she didn't act fast, the whole thing might come crashing down. The hum reached a crescendo, then suddenly stopped. Silence pressed in, eerie and unnatural. Rin froze, her eyes darting to the horizon. The faint shimmer of the dome flickered, just for an instant, and a jagged crack of pure light split the sky above her. Her earpiece crackled again, but this time the voice wasn't Kaylin's. It was a deep, distorted tone she didn't recognize. One word cutting through the static. "Run." Rin didn't wait to be told twice. She bolted down the catwalk, the echoes of the warning ringing in her ears. Rin's boots pounded against the steel catwalk as she sprinted through the maintenance hub. The thin air bit at her lungs, each breath sharp and ragged. She didn't know who it was or how they'd breached her comms, but it didn't matter. Someone was watching, and she was in danger. Metal groaned beneath her feet.
No.
The hum of the dome pulsed once more, deeper this time, like something massive stirring just out of sight. Rin skidded to a stop, steadying herself against the cold railing. Below, the conduits shivered, and faint blue light flickered erratically through the maze of energy veins. Something was moving. She squinted into the shadows. At first it looked like the usual service drones, but these moved differently. Too smooth, too deliberate. Their limbs unfolded with unnatural precision as they crawled along the walls like spiders. Security drones. Rin's blood turned to ice. Maintenance hubs weren't supposed to have security drones. Not here. A small red light blinked to life on the closest machine. It had seen her.
Shit.
The drone's body split open with a mechanical shriek, revealing an arm-mounted stunner. Blue sparks danced at its tip. Without thinking, Rin ducked behind a support pillar as a bolt of electricity sizzled past her ear, exploding against the metal wall.
They're not here to arrest me.
Another bolt cracked overhead, showering her with sparks.
They're here to kill me.
Rin bolted into the narrow service tunnel, her footsteps echoing in the confined space. She tapped at her comms, scrambling to block any remote access. Static filled her earpiece. No connection. The council must have locked down the local network. The tunnel narrowed, pressing in on her. The air smelled of scorched metal and ozone. She reached the first maintenance hatch and yanked it open, slipping inside the cramped vertical shaft. Climbing up wasn't an option. The upper levels were monitored. Down then, her boots clanged against the rungs as she descended into the dark. At the bottom, the shaft opened into a forgotten substation, one of the oldest parts of the dome's infrastructure. The walls here dripped with condensation, the metal corroded by years of neglect. Few people knew these levels even existed, but the shattered did. Rin hesitated. Reaching out to them was suicide if they thought she was a spy, but staying in the open wasn't an option. She pulled out her tablet and scrolled past the council's encrypted channels to an unlisted frequency, one she was never supposed to use, a hesitant breath. Then she tapped transmit.
I need help.
Her voice cracked, barely a whisper.
The dome is failing, or someone is making it fail. The council knows, and they've sent drones after me. If you're listening, I don't care who you are, but I need a way out.
Static. Seconds passed. Minutes. Nothing. Rin was about to kill the signal when a voice finally crackled through, rough and distorted.
You're late.
Her blood ran cold.
Who are you?
Someone who doesn't like the sky falling on my head.
I need a safe exit.
A pause, then
Follow the lights.
the line went dead.
Lights?
She turned, and a dull red glow blinked faintly in the dark, barely visible behind a mesh grate. It wasn't part of any council system she knew. Rin didn't waste time thinking. She pried the grate open and squeezed into the crawl space, the red lights flickering ahead like breadcrumbs. Behind her, distant metallic clicks echoed through the tunnels. The drones were still hunting, and she was running out of time. The red lights pulsed slowly, guiding Rin deeper into the underbelly of the dome. The air grew colder, the walls slick with condensation. Each step echoed like a gunshot in the narrow passage, and every shadow seemed to move at the corner of her vision. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The sound of metal scraping against metal rippled through the tunnel behind her. Rin froze.
They're getting closer.
Heart pounding, she pressed on, muscles coiled and ready to sprint at the first sign of movement. The lights led her to a rusted steel door barely visible behind a collapsed support beam. Scratched into the metal was a single symbol, a fractured circle.
The mark of the shattered. Rin hesitated. Stories about them drifted through the slums like smoke. Terrorists, radicals, ghosts. People who whispered of tearing down the dome, of freeing humanity. People who vanished when the Sky Council got too close. Her comms were dead. The drones were closing in. She had no choice. Rin slipped through the narrow gap and into darkness. The door slammed shut behind her. Click. The barrel of a rifle pressed hard against the side of her head. "Don't move," a voice growled. Rin's breath caught. "I'm not with them,"
She said quickly.
"The council sent drones after me. I'm not—"
Shut up! Cold metal shoved her forward. Dim emergency lights flickered on, illuminating a vast, decaying chamber filled with salvaged tech. Old cables hung like vines, and broken drones lay in pieces across the floor. A woman stepped out of the shadows, rifle steady in her hands. Her hair was shaved close to the scalp, and a jagged scar cut across her cheek. "Who are you?" Rin swallowed hard.
"Rin Calder, technician, Hub 42.
The woman's grip on the rifle didn't loosen. "How did you find this place?"
I didn't. Someone hijacked my comms and told me to follow the lights.
The woman's eyes narrowed. "Who sent you?"
I don't know.
Rin snapped, panic rising.
I was working on the grid when the dome started failing. The energy surges, they're not random. Someone's sabotaging it from the inside. The council knows, and they sent security drones after me to cover it up.
A tense silence followed. Then a slow, sarcastic clap echoed from behind a stack of crates. Well, look who finally opened her eyes. A man stepped into the light, thin and wiry with mechanical implants running down one arm. His voice dripped with mockery. Welcome to the Shattered, sweetheart. Now why should we believe a word you're saying?
Because if you don't, the dome's gonna come down on all of us.
The woman shot the man a glance. He stopped smirking.
I saw the data.
Rin continued, voice steady now.
The fluctuations are deliberate. The council is letting it happen, or worse, causing it. And they're sending kill teams to silence anyone who gets too close.
The man's grin faded. The woman lowered her rifle slightly. We've been watching the dome for years, she said quietly, looking for cracks, but they always held. If what you're saying is true, Rin nodded.
It won't hold much longer.
The woman slung the rifle over her shoulder. I'm Ira, leader of the Shattered. Ira motioned for Rin to follow as she moved deeper into the chamber. We thought the council would cling to power until the end. But this, Ira shook her head. If they're bringing down the dome, they won't stay to watch it fall. They'll escape.
To where?
Rin asked, trying to keep up. Off-world. They reached a war table, an old display flickering with static. A hologram of the dome rotated slowly above it, marked with red warning points. The council built ships years ago, hidden in the upper spires, for themselves and no one else.
They'll let the dome collapse and leave us here to die.
Rin said, feeling her stomach twist. Era nodded grimly. But it's worse than that. The dome isn't just failing. It's wired to detonate. If the core reactor destabilizes, it will trigger a cascading meltdown, a failsafe to wipe out the surface. Rin's legs nearly gave out.
They're not abandoning us. They're erasing us.
Era slammed her fist on the table. That's why we need to move now. Sky Spire controls the dome's core. We take it, we stop the meltdown, maybe even bring the dome down on our terms.
That place is locked down.
Rin said.
Security's tighter than ever. We'd never make it inside.
Era smirked. We don't need to fight through the front. We've been digging a tunnel for months, almost to their walls. All we were missing was someone who knows the grid. Rin stared at the hologram. The Sky Spire loomed above everything, its spires piercing the dome like knives.
You're insane.
Maybe, Era leaned in. But you're here now. So what does that make you? Before Rin could answer, the chamber's emergency lights flickered violently. A distant explosion shook the ground. The man with the mechanical arm cursed, slamming his fist into the wall.
They've found us.
The tunnel walls trembled with distant explosions as dust rained from the ceiling. Rin pulled the collar of her jacket over her mouth, coughing as the air thickened with grit. Behind her, the rebels of the Shattered moved with grim purpose. Weapons clutched tight. Every step toward Sky Spire felt heavier, like the ground itself wanted to swallow them whole. We're close, Era muttered, leading the group through the final stretch of the tunnel. Her voice was low but steady, cutting through the panic that gnawed at Rin's mind. The vibrations in the walls grew sharper, punctuated by dull, rhythmic thuds. Drills.
They're breaching the tunnels faster than we thought.
Era shot her a hard glance. Then we move faster. Ahead, the tunnel ended in a crude metal door, patched with layers of rusted steel. Beyond it lay Sky Spire's underbelly. Era turned to the group, her face hard. We go in quiet, no stray shots, no mistakes. Once we hit the control deck, Rin will shut down the core sequence. Kalen, watch her back. Rin stiffened at the name. From the shadows, Kalen emerged, rifle slung across his shoulder, face unreadable.
You brought him?
Era didn't flinch. We need every hand, and he knows Sky Spire's layout better than anyone. Kalen's smirk was thin and cold. Nice to see you too, Rin. She glared at him but said nothing. There wasn't time. Era signaled to the demolitionist, who placed a small charge on the door. Click, click. The timer blinked red. Ready? The group tensed. Rin's pulse pounded in her ears.
3, 2, 1.
The door blew inward with a muffled boom, and they surged forward into the dark. The corridor beyond was eerily quiet. Sterile walls gleamed under harsh, white lights, a stark contrast to the grime of the tunnels.
Security should be heavier.
Rin whispered. That's what worries me, Era muttered. They moved in formation, weapons raised, footsteps silent against the polished floor. A distant clatter echoed from above, a brief metallic rattle. Kalen froze, raising a fist. Silence. Then, the ceiling exploded. Rin dove as security drones dropped like vultures, their wings unfolding with a shriek of metal. Stunners crackled, flooding the corridor with arcs of blue light. Ambush! Era roared. Gunfire ripped through the air. Rin scrambled behind a console, heart hammering. Sparks showered over her as Kalen fired in short, controlled bursts, dropping 2 drones. Rin yanked open a panel, frantically scanning the wiring.
Give me cover.
What the hell are you doing? Kalen shouted over the gunfire.
Buying us 10 seconds.
Her fingers danced over the wires, sparking violently. Come on, come on. The lights flickered, and with a sharp buzz, the drones froze midair, then collapsed. The corridor went still. Kalen stared at the wreckage, then back at her. Remind me not to piss you off. Move! Ira barked, dragging them forward. The control deck was close. Rin could feel it in the air, the hum of the core bleeding through the walls. They reached a blast door, sealed tight. Rin's tablet lit up. Access denied. Locked, she said, breathless. Kalen stepped forward. Not for long. He pulled a keycard from his pocket. Rin's stomach twisted.
Where did you get that?
Kalen slid it through the panel. The door hissed open. You didn't think I came empty-handed, did you? Ira didn't wait. They flooded into the control deck. Rows of monitors glared down, casting pale light over the massive core display. At the center, the reactor pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, deliberate, but the countdown was already running. Core overload in 004312.
Oh no.
Rin whispered. They started it, Ira growled. Rin dropped to the console, fingers flying.
It's locked behind council encryption. I need time to break it.
We don't have time, Kalen snapped. A slow clap echoed from the far end of the deck. They spun around. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Council armor, black and gold, pristine. A helmet gleamed under the harsh lights. The voice that spoke was calm. You made it farther than I expected. The helmet retracted, revealing a face Rin knew too well. Counselor Voss.
You?
Rin's throat tightened. Voss smiled thinly. You didn't think we'd leave without saying goodbye, did you? Era raised her rifle. Shut it down now. Voss chuckled. Oh, you misunderstand. We're not escaping. We've already left. The reactor groaned, the countdown flickering. 004255. This was always the plan. The dome collapses, and so does everything under it. Kalen's grip on his weapon faltered. You knew, he whispered. Voss's eyes glinted. Of course he knew. Rin's breath caught.
Kalen.
She turned on him.
You traitor.
Kalen didn't move, didn't speak. Voss smiled wider. But I can offer you a choice. His hand hovered over the console. Let the core run its course, and this city dies. Or reroute the overload to the upper spires. Bring the dome down on the council's head. Ira's knuckles whitened on her rifle. Rin stared at the console, torn.
Both options kill thousands.
Voss leaned in. Which thousands, though? The countdown ticked on. 004122 Era looked at Rin. What's it going to be? Rin's hands trembled over the keys. There was no safe choice, no way out, only destruction. And who would burn? The reactor's hum deepened, vibrating through the steel floor as the countdown burned relentlessly forward. 000047 Rin's breath was ragged, sweat stinging her eyes. Her hands hovered over the console, the screen flickering with 2 stark options. Divert core melt down to upper spires. Allow dome core to detonate, both meant death. One was survival bought in blood, the other was oblivion. Voss stood still, the ghost of a smile on his face, as if he already knew the answer. You're running out of time, he murmured. Rin's hands moved, her fingers blurred over the keys. Divert core, melt down to upper spires. Confirmed. The console beeped sharply, and the entire chamber shuddered. Above them, the distant groan of metal giving way filled the air. Era tightened her grip on her rifle, her eyes never leaving Voss. You hear that? She growled. That's the sound of your towers falling. But Voss only chuckled, slow and deliberate. Do you think this ends with me? He whispered. Then he pressed something on his wrist. A sharp hiss. Gas vented from the seams in his armor.
No!
Rin lunged, but it was too late. Voss's body crumpled, lifeless. Self-termination. No answers. No bargaining chip. A deafening crack ripped through the air, and the entire facility shook violently. "Move!" Era shouted, grabbing Rin by the arm. They ran. The world above was tearing itself apart. From the ground, Rin watched as the upper spires of Sky Spire groaned and buckled, massive steel beams snapping like brittle twigs. The dome, once an unbroken arc of shimmering energy, fractured. Long, jagged cracks split across the sky, and shafts of real sunlight pierced through, blinding and pure. For the first time in generations, the sky was visible. The people in the street stood frozen, staring upward in disbelief as fragments of the dome crashed to the ground in fiery streaks. A cold wind cut through the city, untouched by artificial filters. It smelled of rain. Era stood beside Rin, breathing hard, her face lit by the flickering fires of the collapsing spires. "You did it," she murmured. Rin didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on the sky, wide and hollow.
I chose who died.
And yet, above the destruction, the sky was open. The dome was no longer whole, not a prison anymore, but freedom, paid for in steel and blood. Epilogue. The wind moved freely now, no longer filtered or controlled, carrying the scent of scorched metal and fresh rain across the broken city. Where the sky spire once pierced the heavens, only twisted steel and rising smoke remained. Rin sat on the edge of a shattered balcony, overlooking the fractured skyline. Fires flickered in the distance, but beyond the ruin, streaks of blue sky stretched endlessly. Clouds drifted lazily overhead, real clouds. A child's voice broke the stillness. "Is it true?" Rin turned slowly. A small boy stood nearby, barefoot on the cracked concrete, staring up at the sky with wide eyes. "Is it true the sky used to be gone?" he asked softly. Rin followed his gaze upward, the dome's last fragments glinting faintly as they disintegrated in the wind.
It wasn't gone.
She said quietly.
It was stolen.
The boy tilted his head. "And you brought it back?" Rin's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile.
No,
She whispered.
we broke it open.
Far above them, something glimmered in the sky. A distant light, too steady to be a star. Rin's eyes narrowed. The sky was free now, but something was still watching, and it wasn't finished.